Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Tuesday, May 21st meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Commissioner Mary Daly will be participating in this meeting virtually from 718 Mound Avenue, Mankato, Minnesota 56001, which location is open and accessible to the public during the meeting. The Moorhead Public Service Commission welcomes and encourages customer input on issues listed on the agenda or of general water and/or electric utility interest, time, and commission permitting. Speakers are limited to 3-minute presentations. Customers wishing to address the commission regarding a specific agenda item will be afforded an opportunity during the discussion of that item. Customers wishing to speak on matters not listed on the agenda will be given the opportunity to do so under the heading Customers to be Heard and/or Recognitions. Each person requesting the opportunity to speak is asked to fill out a request to speak form located on the back of the room and present it to the administrative assistant in attendance at the meeting. Any follow-up or feedback will be done by email on anything that cannot be resolved this evening. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Paulson, seconded by Daly, to approve the meeting's agenda. Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson, aye. I'd entertain a motion now to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Daly, seconded by Paulson, to approve the consent agenda. Discussion? Paulson?
Aye.
Baker?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Customers to be heard and/or recognitions. Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, one recognition tonight. Jake Long, our water distribution manager, had a milestone in the last month, 10 years. Congratulations, Jake.
Yay, Jake.
Yeah.
And no customers to be heard this evening. Moving on to old business. Anything that we need to bring up? Seeing none, moving on to city council reports. Mr. Gilbertson is not in attendance. Public Service Commission, I don't believe there were any meetings. General Manager's report, Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I've got a pretty lengthy general manager's report, a lot of good items within that document. I'll let you kind of go through the strategic plan updates. Specifically, I'll kind of go through the dashboards a little bit. So first quarter on the electric side, wildlife was of course the main cause of all of our outages, so that's pretty normal. Purchase power was down. That was offset by some of our lower sales that we had as well too in the first quarter. And there's some good information on that in the packet as well too. Staff did a pretty good job of adjusting set points and doing dual fuel or load control as well to help offset some of those costs. So it helped out overall with the finances for the first quarter. And we did actually see that one of the wind turbines was actually working somewhat decently. So still working on those as well, trying to get those running as much as possible. They're valuable, especially while we're in peaking time. So on the water side, water production was good for the first quarter. Uptick in the water hardness we've seen in quarter two, which is because of the White Rock Dam is doing some releasing from that as well too. It's been coming down a little bit with all the rain we've been getting, but it's ongoing. So otherwise, chemical costs per million gallons was higher for the first quarter than first quarter in 2023 as well too. And some of that is cost increases and then just the overall production. On the finance side, net position on the electric side was about $550,000 above budget. And on the water side, just a little over about $25,000 above net position as well too. We did not have any safety injuries during quarter one, and then we've got our social media statistics in there as well too. So let's go on to the next one. Within there, we've got an update on the WAPA rate increase. We've kind of been talking to you guys about WAPA rates are looking to go up. They're working through that process right now. MECA, or Midwest Electric Consumers Association, who works in conjunction with WAPA on projects and costs and things like that. Again, their membership is the cooperative and the municipalities that have allocations from Western Area Power Administration. Them, along with Missouri River staff, met with WAPA staff, trying to discuss those rates. And right now, it looks like they're going to do a two-year phase-in process of their rate increase that they're going to look at. Overall, it's they're looking at about 6 mills for the Upper Great Plains region, which is where what part we're in. So you'll see about a 3 mill increase this year, or for 2025, and then a just under 3 mill increase for 2026. And we preemptively, knowing that there was going to be some WAPA rate increases, we did some adjustments within the budget and our rates last year to help levelize those costs over a few year period. So as we're working through that, we've planned for a 2.5% rate increase on the electric side, knowing that there's a WAPA increase and a Missouri River increase coming. We'll keep an eye on that as they go through their process. They'll put that on the Federal Register and then go through a 60-day hearing process, very similar to how we do our budgeting as well too. They also have a potential that they could reduce the drought adder as well too. Again, that's all based off of rain and accumulated runoff that they got, along with generation production out of the dams on the Missouri River as well too. So I did have a quick update. The DOE did a transformer rule update on transformer efficiencies. WAPA provided a synopsis of that. They kind of looked at it, positive, negatives, environmental impacts, financial impacts. Overall, it was a net positive impact by doing higher efficiency in the transformers. However, there are supply chain issues that were concerns. There was a lot of pushback from utilities, IOUs, cooperatives, manufacturers, just trying to mitigate some of those concerns. So they're going to phase in those efficiencies over the next few years, or I think 3 to 5 years, and hopefully minimize some of those additional supply chain concerns that we've got as well too. Wasn't what we were hoping completely for, but it was a good middle ground as well too. With that, I'm going to have Taylor Holt come up. Have him speak to the IIJA funding status that we've got, and then I'll have Mark come up and speak to the well 8 repairs as well.
The IIJA grant application was submitted in April. The entire compilation or group of applicants were advised to go forward with the application by the Department of Energy, I believe in a letter in early March. So that gives us a good sign and provides us with a little bit more confidence that we may be awarded funds here. Last year, the awards were released in the mid to late November timeframe, so we're sort of expecting it around that time again. Is there anything else you wanted me to touch on, Travis?
Yeah, I think we put in a couple grant applications. I don't know if you want to speak about the battery storage one maybe, or maybe the costs on the IIJA that we're looking at as well too.
I believe, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but as far as the battery storage goes, that does not fall in line with this specific grant application, because the letter in response to that application from the Department of Energy was actually advising us not to go forward with it. It's thought that we were, the big group that we were together with, which included a few projects with Missouri River Energy Services, they felt that it was lacking some content in some key areas that they were looking for in the awards. The total, I apologize, I don't have those numbers ahead in front of me on the total package, but I believe that the total amount that MPS would be responsible for over 5 years was in the ballpark of $1.7 million, of which we've already received notice from the Minnesota Department of Commerce that they would cover half of our responsible portion of it, and that was 25% of the total estimated costs of the projects that we applied for. That I do know.
Yeah, it was about $7.7 million we applied for. Brought that down to about 1.9 million, and then with the Department of Commerce inclusion in that, gets us down to about about $1 million. So that we'd be responsible for. So again, hopeful that we get approval on that. It'll help with some of our projects that we've got on our plan and on our schedule and in our budget. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to utilize some of those funds as well too. So, thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor.
And I'll just have Mark do a quick brief update on the well 8 repairs as well too, and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Travis. Mark Pritchard, Water Plant Manager. As Travis had mentioned, we did finish the repairs on well 8, and they are now complete. We were able to televise the well on February 7th, 2024, and we saw that we had some column pipe and some line shaft that we had to replace. And in total, we ended up replacing actually 32 feet of column pipe and along with about 15 feet of line shaft and associated connecting materials. We were able to get well 8 back on the 17th of April. We did end up finding that we had an oil leak in our 1948 vintage motor. We ended up having to remove that just briefly and replace a few gaskets inside, and it's been running fine since about 3 weeks ago. So happy to hear that that thing's back in service. And then as Travis had mentioned earlier in his report, the river hardness is very high right now. So we're using a lot of our well capacity right now to help blend some of that out. So the timing was very, very much in our favor.
Questions for Mark? Thank you.
Thank you.
Have?
All you have. Okay. I'd entertain a motion to accept the general manager's report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Paulson, seconded by Baker to approve the general manager's report, or accept the general manager's report, excuse me. Any further questions or discussion? Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson? Aye. Okay. Next item. Number 9. Right? Or are we, no?
Nope, 8D.
8E.
D.
D, right, there we go.
So accept annual reliability performance report. So this is a annual item we bring back to the commission, just kind of showing how we did last year with electric reliability. We've been doing this report since about 2004. I'll have Taylor come up and speak to it, but overall we had a good year last year. So
The 2023 annual reliability report is similar to what we had for 2022, which was a below average number of outages and really good statistics as far as the required reporting indices go. We achieved all 3 of the goals that were set by the commission, and we also met the goal of having between 4 and 5 nines of reliability, which means that all of our customers had power between 99.99% of the time and 99.999% of the time. And the reason there's a higher cap on that is because you end up running into diminishing returns on trying to reinvest into your power grid, which could be financially irresponsible in theory. The report also, we get that from a program that we input all of our information into, which comes from APPA, and it's called the E-Reliability Tracker. And the nice thing about this report is it compiles data of all of the participants through this program, and we can compare our numbers to several different kind of filters of comparison, whether it's regional or similar size utilities or investor-owned utilities. But if you're able to flip through that report, you'll see that we are at the same kind of numbers as equivalent utilities or better on all of them. So again, that a lot of it comes down to an overall really good, clean year with outages, but at the same time, we've also been working really hard to keep those numbers really high. So do we have any questions at this point in time?
Questions for Taylor? Numbers look great.
numbers are really good. Just shows how much value we have in the public power sector and how much commitment we have to getting that power on as soon as it goes off. There's a lot of our outages are less than 30 minutes. So it just shows the pride we take in what we do. So just
Yeah.
want to say kudos to the team for that.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I entertain now a motion to accept the 2023 Annual Reliability Performance Report.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Daley, seconded by Paulson. Any discussion or comments? Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daley?
Yes.
Thompson, aye. 8E, Conservation Improvement Program.
Do we want to maybe pause this and go to
9?
9 and then come
Let's
back?
go to, yeah,
Yeah.
that's where it was, that'd be good. Okay, we're going to switch up the agenda here, and we're going to move to item number 9, which is the audited financial statements for 2023.
Right. I've got Mark Moreland, Finance Manager, coming up to the podium here to speak. Again, we had another good year in 2023, and Mark will present that along with Jamie Fay from Baker Tilly.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Mark Moylan, Finance Division Manager. As Travis indicated, this is a formal item to present to you the 2023 audited financial statements. This year's review was completed by Eide Bailey. It was the 5th year of a 5-year contract, so we'll be looking to renew, hopefully an agreement with them to complete and continue on with our annual audits. They do an exemplary job, and you're going to hear me use that word a couple times because I want to also state that the staff here did an exemplary job gathering the data, completing the reconciliations. Allison, first year working on the audit with Moorhead Public Service, and Katie Kemper, who's been with MPS for many, many years working with accounts payable, payroll, et cetera. As usual, we were able to get the stuff that was requested by the auditors in a very, very quick manner. We did most of the work online, so we uploaded things to their secure portal. They did a lot of their field work and testing remote and came back to us with questions. And again, Allison and Katie did a great job returning responses, gathering the data and providing it to them. We started compiling the formal report in mid-April. It was reviewed by Jack Kupich, who did most of the field work here in the Fargo office. And then it was presented to Jamie Fay, who was the partner with Eide Bailey and CPA, and she did the final review and final vetting. And tonight she will present the formal audited financials to you. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jamie so she can go over her presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. As Mark said, my name is Jamie Fay. I'm an audit partner with Eide Bailey, and we did the audit report, got it all signed, sealed, and delivered for MPS for the year ended December 31st, 2023. So I've pulled up the executive summary on the screen if you can see that. So one of the things we like to do is we like to put the information that we see in the financial statements, which are almost 65 pages, into a little bit more color, graphs, historical information, things that we think that are valuable for you to see. So that's what we'll step through tonight. And if you have any questions, just let me know. So first of all, talking about the audit, when we come in and do an audit, we are performing procedures in accordance with government auditing standards. We're following generally accepted auditing standards, making sure that the financial statements are materially accurate. So what that means is we obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute. What that means is we test a handful of things, not every single thing. So we will test maybe 25 revenue transactions. We will maybe recalculate this balance and say, hey, this is what it should be. How do we get to where it should be compared to what we think it should be? There are some estimates that go into the financial statements, such as other post-employment benefits, the net pension liability, and then allowance for doubtful accounts. And through all of our procedures, what we do is we have discussions with management. We look at backup documentation. We talk about how some of these estimates are developed, and then we come to a conclusion on our audit. So the timeline is we do some planning work December through February. That really entails just having some conversations, rolling our work papers. There's a number of different things that we need to document through our process. We do the year-end testing in March and April. So the fieldwork week this year was March 4th, which is consistent to what it's been in the past. And then reporting in May. We issued the audit opinion on May 14th. And so everything was sent off and ready to go. So the results of our audit, that is what everybody wants to know. MPS received a clean audit opinion, or it's called an unmodified opinion. What that means is the financial statements are materially accurate, like we were talking about. So this is our opinion based on the work that we did, based on the standards that we need to follow, that these are materially accurate. So there are a few findings, and you can get findings with the clean audit opinion. There's one finding that we did come up with. It is labeled improper retention of employee personnel forms. So one of the procedures that we did this year was to haphazardly, which kind of just means pick a few people, just pick some people to do some recalculations and look at some backup documentation. This related to the other post-employment benefits liability that is on the books. There was an I-9 document. It was destroyed with some retention policies, and that document just needed to be on file. So nothing concerning in these findings as far as anything we found that was materially wrong or anything like that. So this was outside of the numbers piece. This was just something that we noticed that we needed to report. So in addition to the financial statement procedures, we do some Minnesota legal compliance procedures, which the state auditor has given us a checklist of kind of all of the state statutes they want us to look at. Through those procedures, nothing came up. So there are no Minnesota legal compliance findings. So first, getting into some of the numbers, cash and investments. So this is just a look of colors and graphs of, for the last 10 years, what does cash and investments look like for MPS? You can see a little bit of a dip from 22 to 23. This really is because the reserves were used to fund that initial construction on the two big electric projects. That was replenished in early 2024, but upfront it was just used from reserves. So as of 12/31/2023, there was just a little bit of a dip. The next is just a different look of just the operating cash. So on this last page, you can see there are operating cash, bond reserves, and investments. So we're going to take a look at just that operating cash on the next slide. Again, you can kind of see for the last 10 years where it's been for water and electric, and then total. Again, a little bit of a dip, same reason as we were discussing. So going from there. Next, we're going to talk about a little bit of detail on that cash and investment reserve. So, this really comes into play with, net position and kind of all of that. First and foremost, the reason you want to have those reserves is it contributes to a favorable bond rating, which it sounds like MPS was upgraded last year, which is great news. Second, it produces investment income and can provide a little bit of a source of working capital if needed to meet some of those cash flow needs. And then third, and I would argue probably most importantly, especially after going through a global pandemic and some economic uncertainty, it offers a little bit of a cushion. So if there's an unexpected shortfall in the revenues or anything like that, there's a little bit of a cushion there that can help get through. So the next slide is going to look at that cash on hand in a little different way. This is the days cash on hand. So this represents the number of days that the organization can pay its operating expenses with the unrestricted cash and investments on hand. Again, a downtrend a little bit. That's just simply because of the downturn in the balance, but nothing concerning there. You can just see it for the last 10 years. And this isn't necessarily where a number needs to be. It's just showing you where it is compared to the target. So as you can see, the number that has been actual has been above the target for quite a few of these years, which is great. Next, we're going to look at operations. So these are going to be split out between electric and water. So first, we're going to look at electric. So for the last 10 years, this is going to show you operating revenues, operating expenses, and operating income, as well as a line at the bottom for the transfers. Those are very consistent, so we don't tend to see a lot of fluctuation there. You can see a little bit of a dip in the operating revenues. There was just a milder there were some milder temperatures, so lower sales there. And then coupled with a little bit of an increase in operating expenses. I heard a little bit of chatter about it already, but some rate increases from both of the energy providers really had to do with that. And we will talk about the margin on the next page, but this is really just the numbers of where did we land for the year. So for the electric fund, the margins, you can see from 22 to 23, for the net margin, it remained essentially consistent, went up just a little bit. And then the operating margin is that top line. It dipped just a little bit. Again, nothing concerning, but a little bit of a fluctuation in the activity there. So next, we are going to look at that same type of information, this time for the water fund. So you can see the water fund, that top line is operating revenues. There was an increase in the water rates, so a little bit of a jump up there. But along with that, a little bit of an increase in operating expenses. So that was really increased cost to dispose of that water treatment byproduct material. I think we can all see that everything's just kind of getting more expensive. So with that, the operating income dipped just a hair, but really didn't change too much. And then the transfers out are on the bottom as well. And then similar to how we looked at the electric fund, we'll look at the margins on this next slide. So the margins for the past 10 years for operating margin and net margin are listed here. And again, nothing surprising. It's just a different way to analyze and look at those numbers that we had on the last page. This is really operating income over the operating revenues for the operating margin. So then the other thing that we like to look at in terms of, operations of MPS is the debt service coverage. So debt service coverage is a ratio that looks at what is the cash flow available to meet your requirements for interest and principal payments. So if you had a ratio of 1.0, it would mean that you generate $1 for every dollar of debt payment that you have. So you want to obviously be above 1. And it was about 2.57 for 2023. So again, a little bit of a dip, but this all has to do with that little bit of a dip in cash, which went right back up. So I bet if we were to recalculate it, putting those dollars back in from that issuance that happened in early 2024, it'd probably jump right back up. And with that, is there any questions on anything I presented or anything you'd like to discuss that had to do with the 2023 audit?
Any further clarification?
Okay, hearing none, I just want to say thank you. I know Mark said exemplary job done by the staff, but I again want to echo that same thing. We have a great experience with the staff and with Mark, and we have for years, and so we very much appreciate working with MPS, and we look forward to hopefully working with you again in the future.
Appreciate it.
One statement. I know Jamie talked about the one finding that we had. We have been able to rectify that for a majority of our employees. I think we've got one employee that's still outstanding, but we worked with legal counsel on that to clarify how to fix the situation that we had. So it's pretty much been mitigated. And Ide Bailey was aware of that as well too.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Any questions at all before we move on? Appreciate the time, everybody, and good job on the audit on both sides, the auditors as well as the team that we have in place. Amazing work you guys do.
Well, we appreciate it. And again, if you do have any questions, I'm open to them at this time. As Jamie went through the presentation, everything looks good. Financials are accurate. And again, it went as well as it has been in the other years. This is my 12th year doing this. It's Allison's first. And overall, it went really, really well.
Excellent.
Thanks again, Mark and Allison and Katie for all the work you put into it. I wouldn't be able to do it.
My head just swims listening to the executive summary. It's like, oh, I couldn't deal with it. Appreciate it. Okay, I'd entertain a motion then to approve the audited financial statements.
So moved.
Okay.
Second?
I have a motion by Daley, seconded by Paulson, to approve the 2023 audited financial statements. Any questions, anything that popped up? Then we'll move on. Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daley?
Yes.
Thompson? Yes. Excellent. Thank you. All right, back to 8E.
Sure. I'll have Taylor Holt come up, give a report on the 2023 Conservation Improvement Program, and then the 2024 Conservation Improvement Program Plan. Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, again, this is a report on amount spent and savings from last year, and then a continuation on the plan this upcoming year. For 2023, we ended up falling short of the goal, which is the first time in a few years. Looking at the reasons why, I think a lot of it had to do with our load management program last year. We had some really mild temperatures towards the end of the year, and then one of our large customers also dealt with some fire issues and some contractual issues where they haven't been able to provide us with the same sort of demand response that we're used to, and that they're also missing out on a considerable credit. Along with that, we still met the goal on our low-income appliance upgrade program, but it did end up decreasing year over year, which doesn't have a major effect on the total numbers, but it is one of the programs that the state looks a lot closer at than the other parts of our goals. Included in this is our rebate program. That's another part of the program that we had a little bit lower participation from our industrial customers last year, so we've been reaching out trying to get them back applying for rebates on any of their capital improvement projects. And then another part of the program is our streetlight upgrades that we do for the city. We get very good credit for savings upgrading those streetlights, and it's part of the program where if we go with what we have planned over the next few years, it's actually going to disappear from our SIP program because we will have upgraded all of our old style streetlights to LEDs. Along with that, for this year's program, there was some minor updates to the rebate programs. Residential customers are, the selection of LED light upgrade rebates have been dwindling down, and that's due to LED kind of being the bare minimum standard at this point. With our rebate program, we try to incentivize people going above and beyond than what the bar is set at as far as energy efficiency goes. There wasn't really any major interesting things that were added this year, but there was some refining on the heat pump rebates, and we've been promoting that a lot more this year, along the same lines as trying to promote the federal tax credits that are available to our customers as well. At this point, are there any questions from the commissioners of this on the program?
The SIP program is a state requirement that we have to follow, so we have to do so much based on requirements from the state, and this is the program that we utilize for that.
Questions? I've got one. Could you talk a little bit about you said LED was the bare minimum. I'm not sure I understand that. Could you explain that to me?
So generally, we use the term code or that bare minimum of what's expected nowadays, and LEDs have been around a while, but on all new build projects, the standard at this point is to put in LED lighting. You don't really see contractors putting in fluorescent lighting or incandescent lighting anymore. If you're putting in something new, it's LED or better, which I haven't seen anything better at this point. That's
Okay.
kind of what I mean.
All right. I was thinking there must be something better, but there's
Ah.
not, so.
Not that I know of yet.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
Any other questions for Taylor? Okay, I entertain a motion to accept the report, the SIP report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Paulson, seconded by Baker to accept the report. Any further discussions or questions? Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daley?
Aye.
Thompson, aye. Okay, great. Thank you, Taylor. Prime primary drinking water regulations.
Sure, I'll have Mark Pritchard come up and give his report on this. Again, this is basically PFAS regulations, and I'll let Mark speak to it and where we're at within that and all the testing that's been going on. So, Mark, I'll let you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Travis. Mark Pritchard, Water Plant Manager. As Travis had mentioned, this is the first primary drinking water standard established by EPA for PFAS compounds. Over the past 10 years or so, Moorhead Public Service has worked with a variety of outside agencies to test to see what our total risk and exposure is to a various amount of PFAS compounds. We started working with the Department of Health. We've worked with the Army Corps of Engineers at one point. We've also worked with the Army National Guard at one point or another as they sample for their various bases throughout the state and other installations. The most recent round of sampling has been through the UCMR 5. It's called the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. That's a rule established by EPA where every few years they look to see if there are new compounds worth looking into for possible regulatory action to be taken. And with UCMR 5, the most recent rendition, a total of 29 PFAS compounds and lithium were looked at in a group together. And the UCMR 5 timeline goes until 2026. They're not done with it yet. They're kind of in that data compilation stage. However, with the litany of research that's been done with PFAS compounds over the last decade in particular, they saw that action was needed on a nationwide scale to start wrangling in these compounds. At the end of the day, fluorinated compounds are very stable in the environment. They don't break down the way a lot of things do, and they bioaccumulate in things like fish, predatory animals, humans, and they cause negative effects at very low concentrations. So with those low concentrations being more well understood, a total of 6 primary drinking water standards were established and notified to utilities across the country on April 10th, 2024. So on the item that we have here, we have a table in the middle here. It shows 6 PFAS compounds with 5 primary maximum contaminant limits, or MCLs. There is the 4 or 5 listed here, and then at the bottom there is one that has an HI, or a hazard index calculation. That has a significant figure of 1, meaning that if you have a 1 calculation value or less, you are in compliance if you have co-occurrence of more than one of these compounds. If you have a 1 or higher, then you would need to put in extra treatment capabilities to your facilities to make sure that you stay within the rules and keep those compounds to a minimum. So with that being said, where is MPS in all this? I'm very happy to report that we have no PFAS compounds that breach these very stringent new regulatory standards with no additional treatment necessary at this time. That's a very enviable position compared to most utilities across the country. For the 29 compounds that were tested, we did have some various hits where it was detectable by the instrumentation that was being used. However, the levels that we had were estimations because they were low enough where the monitoring equipment couldn't tell how much was there, or how little rather was there. So all but 2 samples came back as either non-detects or so low they couldn't tell how low because it was below the treatment or the monitoring capabilities of the equipment. Now, with that being said, the 2 samples that we did have hits on, so to speak, were called PFBA. We ended up looking into that and found that one of the regulated compounds, if it does break down to a certain extent, this is the byproduct of it. It's a lot different chemistry-wise compared to its longer chain cousin. And the Department of Health for Minnesota right now has a health advisory level of 7,000 parts per trillion. Our maximum level that we saw was 5.9, so we are still orders of magnitude below any of these regulatory thresholds at this time. If we do see issues in the future, we already do have best available technologies in the plant as of today that's been running, and that is our GAC filter media. GAC filter media is able to physically absorb and basically take out of solution these compounds as long as the absorptive capacity of the media is maintained. So if it gets exhausted, you simply replace it with fresh media. So we already have that in place, and we've been running that since 2020, and we're positioned very well for any future regulations at this time. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Paulson.
Oh, unfortunately, I have an engineering question. So these tests are actually, they're sampled with the source water, but after the water goes through the media filters, you're not detecting any of the PFAS that you just mentioned, or the PFAS byproduct that you just mentioned?
We did see one hit for PFBA that was in the finished water reservoirs. However, it was not the 5.9, it was a 3.5 part per trillion level, and that one did have a J designation from the laboratory, meaning it was an estimation. So the Red River has had some studies done by our fellows in North Dakota, and they did see that the Red River from time to time does have about 6 different PFAS compounds of varying levels of single part per trillion densities, depending on where you sample it at. So it's not quite clear where they're coming from, because to everyone's knowledge at this point, there is nothing upstream that either generates or uses PFAS compounds at scale. So it's difficult to tell if it's some kind of byproduct or if it's something like Teflon tape in our sample lines that is causing these compounds to be detected. So we're in the process of actually replacing and removing a lot of our PVC threaded coatings with Teflon tape, for example, and replacing them with copper lines to see if that makes a difference for future sampling efforts.
Thank you.
That's good to know. Thank you for asking that question. Any other questions for Mark? Seeing none, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate the effort, and keep your eye on the drinking quality, because boy, we've got great water,
Always.
always. All right, I'd entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Daley, seconded by Paulson, to accept the report on the water regulations established for PFAS. Any discussion or questions?
Just want to add that, I've always appreciated Moorhead water, but even more so now that I don't have it every day.
That's so true. Okay. Baker.
Aye.
Paulson.
Aye.
Daley.
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Excellent. Having completed number 9, we're moving on to number 10, voluntary watering restrictions.
I'll have Mark speak to this. Again, another annual item. We go into voluntary water restrictions to help limit the amount of water used in town in the summer typically. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Travis. Mark Pritchard, Water Plant Manager. As Travis had mentioned, this is an annual item that we've done all the way back since 1990 for being good stewards of our water resources. Typically, we put in voluntary watering restrictions from May till October, or some variation very close to it, that generally coincides with our warm season here in the upper Midwest. The idea behind it is to be part of a broad effort to conserve water across the board, reduce our peak demands at the plant, so that delays any kind of capital projects to need more capacity during those high demand months. And then it also helps us reduce chemical costs as we be good stewards of those treatment resources. So for our voluntary watering restrictions that we put in, it's the easiest to go off of even odd addressing for things like lawn watering. So if you have an address that ends in an even number, even days of the month, we encourage people to water their grass on those days, and then have the odd address values going on odd days, and so on and so forth. There are a few exemptions for things such as gardens, flower beds, newly planted trees and shrubs, and new sod. Those are exempt. We want to make sure that those are established and healthy. The history of the conservation rates that go along with our voluntary watering restrictions, going back to 2013, the Minnesota legislature made a new statute, 103G.291, which requires demand and conservation measures to be put in place by all public water utilities. So what that does is it establishes a baseline flow rate for a residential customer, for example, and it has a non-peak factor and a peak factor. And typically it's November to April to see what a winter baseline is, and then anything above 150% of that level is what this summer adder is. And the more you use, the higher the rates go to, again, encourage that conservation. So that information is down towards the bottom. And we do also have some information not only on the MPS website, but then also generally across the internet that talks about ways to easily conserve water at your home. We always like to put the plug in for lawns being the easiest way to take care of some of these things, leaving it a little bit taller so that the roots have some shade. And most grass around here needs about 1 inch of water a week to be nice and healthy. So we encourage people to use those even odd days and then not overdo it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Looks like nothing, Mark. Sorry. I entertain a motion to approve the summer voluntary watering restrictions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Baker, seconded by Paulson. To approve the summer voluntary watering restrictions. Discussion? Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daley?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Okay, ozone generator replacement equipment. Oh, I guess it's still you, right?
Yep, yep. We'll have Mark, over the last roughly 6, 7 months, we've been talking about this. We even brought it up during our budget session last fall. Paul, I know you weren't, or Commissioner Baker, you weren't available at that point in time. Again, we've got some 30-year-old equipment in our water plant that needs to be replaced. It's very hard to, or almost impossible to find replacement parts. So we're going through that process of hiring a consultant, which we did, which is Short, Elliott, and Hendrickson. And we've got to the point now where we're going to get approval for purchasing some ozone generator equipment. And then after that, we'll go through construction. I'll let Mark kind of go through the details of that. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Travis. Mark Pritchard, Water Plant Manager. As Travis had mentioned, this is the next stop on a series of events to get to new ozone generator equipment within the water treatment plant. So, as Travis had mentioned, this is the next in a series of steps. We started off about November, early December last fall, getting ready for an RFP for professional engineering services to help with what we called a selection first design process. And this is the selection portion of that process. So when we went through the RFP and got competitive quotes for the engineering services, we put together an RFP that laid out a very distinct track of events that we wanted to take care of first. And the first step was doing what we called the selection first process for the generator vendor itself. That has the longest lead times, and we did not want to get through the design into the construction bidding and then start up to a 2-year ticking clock before the equipment actually got to the site. We didn't want to wait that long. So what we did was, as part of Short, Elliott, Hendrickson's task order number 9, they first had to evaluate critical components of what we needed for the plant. Not necessarily the cheapest option, but what is the best option. That's what we were going for. It's too critical of a component to not get what you need. So as part of that, this selection first process heavily leveraged what's called best value contracting. It's a newer format that MPS has used, I think, once prior to this process. It was for our AMI project, and that's where we gleaned a lot of good information from our coworkers internally. And we put together a pre-selection weighted scoring of cost and several other factors, including previous performance, cost of maintenance, and the technical abilities of the vendor, timeliness to our needs, and the ability to use existing process equipment without having to go buy extra support equipment. We wanted to use what we have because it's still in very good repair. So it's a very unique process, and we have a lot of stipulations. And so far, we have gotten through that first big step. It is the generator selection itself. So we put together a list of criteria, and we put a weighted scoring together, and cost was 10% of the total scoring that we had. And the biggest 2 components were actually the performance of previous projects and then the ability for ongoing O&M mitigation through the vendor. That was big for us. Again, the robust design, the length of service without any major breakdowns, past history, that was what we were looking for. And cost was a factor. And what we did as part of the evaluation process is we had our engineer redact the cost, and then we looked at strictly the performance criteria in the rest of our selection designs. And then we scored everything, and then we incorporated the cost after to make sure that it didn't bias us too much. And the nice thing about that selection is you truly see what performance do you need. And it also lined up quite well that all 6 of our scoring reviewers unanimously selected Veolia for this system. So they ended up winning out on 5 out of the 6 categories. They were not the cheaper of the 2 options. They were about $73,000 difference between one vendor to the next. So the recommendation this afternoon is for initiating purchasing activities with Veolia for the amount of $1,239,970, with the option for the general manager, Mr. Travis Schmidt, to be able to approve change orders not to exceed 5%. That way, if we need to make a few adjustments to the design to tweak it to make sure that certain components can fit through the door, quite literally, that gives us the option to do so. So That is kind of where we're sitting there. We do have 2 million that we were able to reallocate towards this process. I'm very happy to report that costs from our COVID examples came down by about $400,000 from what MPS's internal estimates were for this purchase. So we were thinking about 1.6, we came back at about 1.2. So that's in our favor as well.
Questions? Go ahead, Mr. Paulson.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment just to say publicly, because this is the type of innovation that we do at MPS that I think should be applauded. The best management or best value contracting procedure for a piece of equipment like this is absolutely essential. And had you just done traditional bidding, you're not going to get the equipment and the service long term that ultimately saves time and money for our organization. So I just want to commend the general manager and Mr. Pritchard for pursuing this type of contracting for this piece of equipment, because this is exactly the right application for it. And yeah, it's not the cheapest, but in the long run, it will be the cheapest. I'm convinced of that. So thank you both for that.
Thank you for those words. And one thing to add too, one thing that played a factor in our review process is Veolia made it very obvious that they had backwards compatibility with new parts. So assuming that we get this awarded this afternoon and 10 years down the road they come out with a new dielectric technology, it will be back compatible to go into the existing system that we have. Other systems don't do that. Essentially the support equipment, the backup parts, they do have a service life and a shelf life as well. When they move on to new designs, none of the new stuff works with the old stuff. This stuff does. So that's another big reason why we were very happy to see that the pricing was very close between the two, and we were able to select Veolia because of it.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd entertain a motion then.
I'll move approval.
Second.
A motion by Paulson, seconded by Baker, to approve and authorize the purchase of the ozone generator replacement equipment. Discussion. Seeing none. Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daley?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Item number 12, task order number 9 with Apex.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have Jake Long. He's since Mark's been taking on the ozone, Jake's got lead service lines. And so he's gonna do a quick update on that, and we're gonna do a little pilot project this year for doing some private lead service line replacement. So I'll let Jake explain where we're at with that and what we're asking for tonight, and let him tell you the cost.
Thank you, Travis. Jake Long, Water Distribution Manager. This item on the agenda is to approve a task order with Apex Engineering to complete design and engineering and funding administration services associated with the MPS 2024 lead service line replacement pilot project. And kind of before I get into the nuts and bolts of the project, just wanted to kind of do a quick overview of the lead and copper rule, and that the Minnesota EPA and the Minnesota Department of Health regulate lead in drinking water through the lead and copper rule. And this was first published in 1991. And since that time, this regulation has undergone numerous revisions since that time, and with another revision planned for October 16th of 2024. And one of the main requirements of that revision is the for the upcoming lead and copper rule is that utilities are required to inventory all water services, both public and private, within the distribution system, and submit this information to the MDH by August 15th of 2024. In 2022, we created the lead service line inventory project, and at this time, we're about 60% complete, and we're requesting customers to submit that information to us. We have an online survey, as well as you can make an appointment, and our staff will come help you with that process. Other items in the rule revision include increased sampling and testing requirements, and public notification. So with that, We also, or another item that we expect to happen that's been kind of talked about is that the EPA may also require that most lead service lines be replaced within the next 10 to 15 years, which is a lot. And that kind of leads us to what we're proposing with a pilot project. There's been funding for lead service line replacements available through a combination of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the state of Minnesota matching funds. Since 2022, MPS has prepared applications to attempt to procure funds to replace identified lead service lines through the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority Drinking Water Revolving Fund. Since last fall, MPS has been working with the Minnesota PFA and the Minnesota Department of Health to create a plan that best fits MPS. And with the lead service line replacement plan through the PFA, it's fairly new. So with that being new, we wanted to create a project that was fairly small, and hence the pilot project. And we've identified 10 private service lines to complete in the summer and fall of this year. And the idea behind this is it'll lay the foundation for lead service line replacement projects from the beginning stage of planning and design and specifications to the final stage of construction. What's kind of unique about the 10 private lead service lines, we completed 2 water main replacement projects in 2023, and during those replacement projects, we replaced the MPS owned or the public owned portion of those lead service lines. So we went back into those 2 project areas and we identified 10 lines that are 10 private lead service lines. And so the pilot project will come into those areas and replace the private side, which will eliminate a partial lead service line replacement. And with the agreement that we'll have with the PFA, and due to all the services being entirely private on this pilot project, this will ultimately result in a reimbursable grant, a 100% grant for all the projects, including engineering and construction. And then just want to touch base on the reason for a pilot project with it being 10 is just so we can have a better understanding of what this will look like moving forward with federal funds, state funds, and the additional requirements with that. And the other reason is we're going to be working on private property, which we typically don't do. So this will be another challenge that we'll have working with homeowners and working on private property. So, and we've been working with Attorney John Bolger on an agreement that we'll have with homeowners. So, and that's in the works, and through this task order, we'll get into more of that nuts and bolts of the actual project plans and specifications. So. Kind of a lot, but with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a funding question. So these are 100% state grant reimbursable items. That money ultimately comes from the federal government, though, is that correct, to the state, and then it's distributed by the state to local governments?
Yep, so the federal government, to receive the federal funds, states need to do a matching fund. So I think it was last legislative session, the Minnesota legislature approved to match those funds. So then now that gets reimbursed to the local governments.
Okay, thank you.
On similar lines, in terms of this matching, is it limited in terms of dollars or? No, excuse me, I'm sorry. Not the matching, but the 100% reimbursable. Is that limited, or is this? It's not just a open pool of water that we can dip in, right? I mean, this is fixed resources.
Right. So to receive these funds for private lead service lines, the funding needs to go through the water utilities to receive it. So a private homeowner can't go and replace their own private service line and be reimbursed for that, just because with the federal funding comes other requirements as far as their stipulations. So to receive the funds, it has to go through the city and water utilities.
Great.
I don't know if that answered your question, but it's,
It kind of did. My question wasn't well formulated, so you did a good job.
yeah, and like I said, this is very new, and we've been working with Minnesota PFA and MDH, and we're working together on a plan that kind of best fits our MPS's scenario. So they feel comfortable with our plan, and I think we're really going to learn a lot within this project and what it looks like moving forward.
Excellent.
I have one more question, Jake.
Yeah.
Just this is a state issue, and there's probably a number of public utilities that are dealing with the same thing. Have we benchmarked, or has anyone else done a pilot like this, or are we ahead of others, maybe similar in size or scope on the project?
Yeah, I think Duluth and St. Paul Regional Water Services they've completed a few lead service line replacement projects. I know St. Paul, for example, they use some of the COVID. What was that called again?
I'm drawing a blank.
They used some of the funds that were
Available during COVID that was given to each, city or municipality. And they took all of those funds, I think 100% of those funds, and used them towards doing lead service line replacements.
Yeah,
Now-
basically to kick off their lead service line replacement plan. So I would say, during the last few years, anytime we go through a replacement area and we come across a public lead service line, we replace it up to the right of way. So the nice thing about this pilot project, it'll only be the private sided replacement. So, and that's where the 10 of them come into place. With the last 2 years, we've had 10 that we've come across, and we'll replace those remaining partials. But I would say overall we're kind of ahead of the game a little bit as far as working with the PFA and MDH on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say we're probably one of the leaders in the group of that. There's a lot of utilities that probably haven't even started their inventory piece of it yet. And I know they're working through that process as well too. But we started early knowing that we could have a potential for a lot of lead service lines in town just based on the area that we were looking at. And we've had a lot of questions at the council meetings as well, just based on replacing the water main, and there could be an impact that they could have a lead service line, and we're working through all those processes as well too, and trying to figure out how to market and communicate that. And I know Jake and I have been talking about bringing forth just more communication to the commission, so that you guys are aware of what's going out and how they mitigate some of those issues until those lines can get replaced.
Yeah, and we're actually this summer, one of our replacement projects is in a very lead, there's a lot of lead service lines in it, so the pilot project, hopefully the plan would be to come back in again the following year and replace the private service lines of it, so.
Hey, is there a timeline on how much or how long the money is going to be available to do this, or how much, how much funding will be available for the private side going forward as well too?
I'm not sure. I can look into that and get back to you. I know there is a set amount right now. I don't know how fast it's going to be used. It does take a lot of work to set these projects up and a lot of requirements to go with it. So, but I don't have the exact amount at this time.
That was the question I was trying to ask. Exactly what I wanted to know. Thanks, Jake.
Yep.
Any other questions for Jake? Okay, I entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Baker, seconded by Daly, for the pilot project for the lead service line replacement. Discussion? Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Okay, item 14, legal counsel with Spencer Fain.
Yep.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Back in February, we were notified by Attorney Caleb Brennan, or Kathleen Brennan, I should say, that McGrath Shea, who does all of our or does our electric service territory legal counsel. McGrath Shea was going to be dissolving. They just had some stuff impact them that was not foreseeable. And so she has moved on to Spencer Fane and asked if we would want to continue with her services at Spencer Fane. So this letter just basically is a engagement letter for us to approve that or have the commission approve continuing to utilize Kayla going forward. She's done a great job for us over the past few years. I've had a good working relationship with her and John as well. I did talk with Chair Thompson and John about this before we brought it forth to you, and just asking for you guys to approve utilizing Kayla at Spencer Fane. So then we just made a couple minor tweaks to the legal counsel, legal services, and how it's being utilized. We noticed that Flirting Hood was a secondary, not a primary, so we wanted to make some adjustments there as well too. So
Perfect.
overall, nothing major. Again, it's just being able to utilize Kayla going forward if we have a electric service territory conflict that comes up, which right now we don't, but give us a minute. I'm sure we will.
Sure. Any questions? Entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Paulson, seconded by Baker to approve the services for legal counsel with Spencer Fane. Discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll just mention Kayla's been very good to work with in the past when we've had these things, and for the new commissioners here that maybe don't know that, I'm in complete support of continuing our working relationship with her, and I know she is going to help us out in the future. So.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then we'll take a vote. Baker?
Aye.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Okay, great. Item number 16. Okay, going to go to closed session, and this meeting will now be closed for executive session as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3B. The closed session is pursuant to attorney-client privilege to discuss potential litigation and potential settlement of matters involving the Capture of the Sun trademark. Are we expecting action? Okay. Then we'll select action may be taken in open session upon conclusion of executive session. However, we will adjourn upon conclusion of executive session if no further action is needed in open session. Okay. Meeting's now closed. Going to the Oak Willow Room. She's on though, it looks like.
She is on, yeah.
She's up, yeah. All right, then. Well, we have reopened the public meeting. We closed the closed session, we've opened the public meeting, and now we've come to the decision to adjourn. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Paulson, second by Baker to adjourn the meeting. Baker,
Aye.
Paulson,
Aye.
Daley?
Mary, you're muted.
Mary, are you on? Thompson, aye.
Mary?
Adjourn. No, we don't
Okay.
need. Yeah.
All right,
We're
we're done.
adjourned.